Hope you're doing well today. It is May 7th. Our reading today comes from the Psalms. You can check out the description, number of Psalms in the reading today, 12 through 17 and 19 through 21. We're going to be looking exclusively in Psalm 14, verse 1. Let's read. Psalm of David. The fool has said in his heart, "There is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there are any who understand, who seek God. They have all turned aside. They have together become corrupt. There is none who does good, no, not one." Let's pause for a moment. That verse is quoted in Romans. Now, the point of the Romans passage, if you're familiar with Romans, the first section of Romans deals with the Gentiles and how God gave them over to a debased mind because they rejected God. It speaks, anyway, it says a good bit about the Gentiles and how they needed the Messiah. And then you have the Jews, and guess what? The Jews also needed the Messiah because all have sinned. And certainly that is true. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. But sometimes people will look at that passage and they'll say, "Oh, see, we can't do good. Nobody does good." And it goes to the Calvinistic notion of depravity, which I would suggest is unscriptural. And I think one of the places you can show it's unscriptural is actually the psalm that Romans is quoting from, the psalm that we're looking at. They have all turned aside. They have together become corrupt. There is none who does good, no, not one. Have all the workers of iniquity no knowledge, who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call on the Lord. Now look at it. There they are in great fear, for God is with the generation of the righteous. You shame the counsel of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that salvation would come out of Zion. When the Lord brings back the captivity of his people, let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad. Certainly all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We are not debating that. But the point of this passage here in this psalm, in the context, God is with the generation of the righteous. There they are in great fear. Right? David is not saying that nobody calls on the name of the Lord, because obviously people do call on the Lord. David calls on the Lord. David is not saying in verse 1 that everyone is a fool and everyone says there is no God. No, we're contrasting the righteous with the unrighteous. Now, obviously, the overall problem is that, again, all have sinned. David looked forward to the Messiah. Romans also speaks about David. David looked forward to the Messiah as all the faithful look forward to the Messiah. The Lord was his refuge. The Lord is our refuge. God is with. There they are in great fear. And when we look into the world, and as David looked into the world, there were times where he had great fear. He had great fear. And he was there, and he would pray to the Lord. The Lord was his refuge. And it's the same for us. So I wanted to read that psalm today, just because sometimes people take the Romans passage and they try to make it mean something. You have to look at the context of Romans, and you have to look at the context of Psalm, and don't make the Romans passage mean something that it doesn't really mean. All have sinned, but at the same time, there's the passage in Romans that speaks about Abraham and David, and it talks about righteousness, that it is accounted as righteousness. So anyway, you can study that on your own. Appreciate you following along with me. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you join us for our next brief look into God's Word.